feel like Kobe in the fourth quarter.
This is the Dane Moore NBA podcast. We're brought to you by Prize Picks and coming at you Friday morning. It's January 24th. The Wolves' last game was Wednesday night in Dallas, and the next game is Saturday afternoon against the Denver Nuggets at Target Center. I guess a 2 p.m. start on Saturday. Anyways, on yesterday's show, Britt Robson and I, we went deep on that Dallas win, kind of topics related to the Wolves winning that game, what we saw in that game. So if you're looking for more of like the, I guess, typical podcast where we're talking about a more recent game, go back to that one with Britt. We also talk about the Denver matchup a little bit in the last segment of that. Today's show, because there was no game yesterday, and there isn't another game till tomorrow. We're going to kind of, I don't know, maybe this be a little bit of a smorgasbord. Is that the word? Episode. I have Kyle Theige here with me. We're going to look at some specific Julius Randle trades as an exercise that would just kind of like put it out to Twitter to get a bunch of options that people are, kind of thinking about themselves. After that, we'll talk some Rob Dillingham, Finch related topics, a handful of different things. But again, we don't have a specific game to talk about for this one, but I'm excited to zoom out a little bit with Kyle. Yeah, Kyle Theige here with me. What's up, man? Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. Do you think you could spell smorgasbord?
No, I actually tried it in my notes and it got the little red squiggly. Okay. So no.
No, I'm happy Friday. I'm excited for this. We are now less than, as we say now almost every Friday, it's either a massive high or a massive critical podcast of someone's comments or something. But I kind of have found myself this week, I don't know if it's because they have 2 matinee games, obviously on Martin Luther King Day and then this Saturday. It's an early one, right? But I kind of found myself a little rejuvenated, I can spell that word, about this team because we're less than 2 weeks away from the trade deadline. This ownership thing I think is coming up real soon. You'll have some news on that. And I think the worst is behind you. And then also I caught up and I watched these last 2 games, and the Grizzlies loss was bad. The Dallas win was, I guess in some people's minds, bad. But I don't know. I think there's some fun stuff to start to talk about, and it does start with kind of the elephant in the room of what are you going to do in the next 2 weeks? Because those next 2 weeks could set you up for the next 2 to 4 years. Yeah. As did the D'Angelo Russell trade, right? That's what you're talking about there, and it has a cascading impact over years out. And I thought when if people want to look at this on Twitter, I just put out a tweet. It was like, hey, send me screenshots of Julius Randle trades. I think there's like 135 of them below that tweet. So if you want to kind of scroll through some of these just to get an idea of, maybe you don't follow the salary cap really closely and understand what the restrictions are, like understood. I don't know how that works in the NFL or baseball or whatever. But I thought it was interesting just scrolling through these trade offers that a lot of people had put together. That is probably, you spend a lot of time thinking about this. I think a lot of people have spent time thinking about Julius Randle trades. And what's interesting to me, Kyle, about these trades is they almost have to be formatted like the D'Angelo Russell trade from 2 years ago, which was one bigger salary going out for 2 smaller salaries together for that player. And then you kind of attach picks accordingly. That was D'Lo going out, Mike Conley and Nickeil Alexander-Walker coming in. And because the Wolves can't take back more money in a trade, right? And because they can't trade 2 players in a single deal, this is kind of the format of what a theoretical Julius Randle trade would be. Now, you can mix it up into a 4-team, 5-team trade, but pretty much in any sort of deal, the Wolves are, in a Randle deal, are sending out a Julius Randle and taking back, 2 lesser pieces, but maybe 2 pieces that they feel fit the timeline, the salary cap, the positional needs a little bit better. I mean, we can get into specific ones, but I want to just start with like what you think about the concept of a 2-for-1 trade and what that would feel like on this roster. As I feel like every time you and I do an episode, we're like, well, guy number 8, guy number 9, guy number 10 in the rotation we would like to see play. That's the hard part to me about bringing in 2 guys. It's like, well, probably the second guy that you bring in this 2-for-1 trade might not play. You got me started early. It comes down to me of what are you trying to do?
Yeah.
because again, I'm always just going to be a little more optimistic because we're talking about sports and not, other serious topics. But I'm at the point now, and I think it's infused by a lot of the stuff you've talked about this week with Jace and Britt. Like, what is your goal this season? Because I'm having fun still watching some of these games, but I'm also very cognizant of the people that are like, this is a play-in team. This is a 500 team. So, like, this idea of, well, what if we trade a 1 for, like you used the analogy the other day of an 83 for a 78. Okay, but does the 78 help you next season more than the 83 might, right? And we're seeing that the 83, also, by the way, this idea, not to criticize you, but this idea that the Wolves front office wouldn't do like a 98 for an 83 and a pick. Well, they did that 2 days before the training camp started, right? Like they did trade Conley Towns for, or whatever you want to give them on 2K. Like they did trade one good player for 2 lesser players. Yeah. One of those really has hit, I think, in Dante. And the other one, I think we're starting to come around, just like, I think Julius Randle, good player, bad fit. Like, it's that simple. It's not, we don't need to like fight his family on this. Like, he's just probably not the ideal fit long-term for this team next to Ant. And that's even before you factor in the Naz Reid stuff. So I will say it's very dangerous to hop on Twitter and click in the replies right now. But I thought a lot of the trade offers that were sent you were actually really good, or like at least made like sense. So like for this fan base, this is not the truth for the other ones, but for this fan base, like congratulations. Like I thought you did a really good job, because my biggest complaint still when I look at these trade offers or when I listen to what you say, I'm just reminded how bad this collective bargaining agreement is. Like, you and I cut our teeth 8 years ago writing blogs and stuff about, like, all these fun different ways to have slop and make these trades, and now I get a lot of my friends send them to me and, like, that's illegal. Like, you can't do that. Like, let's start with the people that are trade Rudy. You can't. So you can't trade Rudy Gobert. So eliminate that. But I thought there were some really interesting ones in there, and a lot of them do come down to breaking Julius Randle into 1 or 2 different assets. One of them might keep you afloat for the next 30 games, but maybe the other one, like Nickeil did, right? Like, no one really knew what Nickeil Alexander-Walker was. He was a broken asset when they acquired him. Like, people forget that he was like, oh, is he going to play for the Shanghai Sharks? And then Finch or the staff or whatever, like, brought him back to life. So that is, to me, how I want to look at this segment of what can you turn Julius Randle into, even if it is 2 lesser parts.
So I'm gonna throw up a couple different ones on the screen, because a lot of the deals were similar. It was like somehow getting back 2 players from a Portland, from a Chicago, from a Detroit, from a Washington, Toronto, those type of teams. And just as an example, I'm putting up this this offer that somebody sent to me on here. Actually, numerous times I saw this one, which was Malcolm Brogdon and Jonas Valanciunas for Julius Randle. And rather than getting into the specifics of the player, I want to just like start with Brogdon is an expiring contract at $22.5 million. And then Jonas Valanciunas has 3 years left on about $10 million per year on his deal. And that's a lot of these trades. Another popular one was Lonzo Ball and like Jalen Smith from the Chicago Bulls. That's kind of the same thing. Lonzo's on this expiring $20+ million deal. Jalen Smith is on this $8.5 million for the next couple of years sort of deal. Those both stack together, and they lead to being less than Randle's salary. So it works, right? It's hard, because if you wanted to just like clear the Julius Randle thing out of the deck, right, then I think you would want to take back just expiring, right, and just be like, okay, now we have more flexibility for Nickeil and Naz, and that's the real motivation, anyways, for making this Randle trade. The primary one is to be able to retain Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Naz Reid, and maybe use a little bit of the mid-level. I just kind of struggle with some of these deals that, take back future money, even if, like in this Valanciunas case, it's not like a lot of money. It's 10 million a year. And then that Brogdon piece expires. But I just feel like to take back long-term money, I would like to really like one of the pieces that are coming back so as to let go of Randle. And that's like a wall I run into for this making sense to me in a lot of different trades. Though I have the other side of my brain talking like, hey, you got to pick one of these if you want to retain Naz Reid and Nickeil Alexander-Walker. But I'm just kind of underwhelmed in this trade specifically, Brogdon and Valanciunas for Randle, with like what it even accomplishes other than just simply Julius Randle not being on the team, which I know a lot of people want. I just don't think I'm a get rid of Julius Randle by any means necessary sort of viewer at that point. And part of that is because I think Julius is playing better recently.
Yeah, and unlike Bill Simmons, what he did on his pod the other day, I'm not going to pretend that I know all the rules anymore about how this stuff works. So that idea that you just put out there, which was essentially Julius Randle for Malcolm Brogdon and Valanciunas, to me, and this is, we should talk about this groundwork before we build other trades. I'm just concerned. I think Julius Randle's a better player than any of us are giving him credit for, and I think he's done a lot to sacrifice to like fit in. I really think that. Like, I watched that Mavericks game. There were times when he needed a bucket. He had that off. I mean, he might have been the best defensive big on the court. That one stop he had on Gafford, but it's the player option thing, right? Like, if he didn't have a player option,
yeah,
would you be trying to trade him?
No, because then he would be an expiring, and you could
Right.
you could figure that you could achieve that goal of no salary on the books by simply, letting him walk or not re-signing him to a contract in the year. You're right to bring up the player option. That this is the looming thing overall. And some people are hearing me say this right now and go, well, Dane, I would give like letting go of the possibility of Randle making 30 plus million next year is worth taking on Jonas Valanciunas for 10 million for next year, or Jalen Smith, even if you don't like necessarily love those pieces, because 9 million, 10 million, whatever to Valanciunas or 8.5 million to Jalen Smith is just significantly less than the 30 million you'd be, committing to Randle. And I get that. I don't have a strong counter for it. I'm just still underwhelmed by the talent in the return, I guess.
Yeah. And again, we may go all over the place here in the spin cycle, because I think right now the Minnesota Timberwolves as an organization are kind of in the spin cycle, because again, there's this idea of, you traded Cat financially to clear the books and try to make this thing look better, 5-year plan.
Yeah.
But then are you trying to maximize wins right now? Because I think any deal we talk about in this segment is going to make them worse, in my opinion. But I'm also open to the idea of like, I have some specific starting lineup stuff that we can talk about later that I want changed. Like, I would like Naz Reid to start, because if you're going to back the Brinks truck up again for him and keep him here, and I think he wants to stay here, don't you want to know if he can be a starting power forward? Like, don't you want to get in on that now rather than pay him this summer and then it just like for some reason fizzled out?
Sure.
But the Julius Randle player option thing, the reason I bring that up is if it didn't exist, you probably wouldn't be as motivated to trade him, but you still could. But that's kind of my whole end result. It's not to get Naz Reid a starting spot or to have I mean, I think they're going to sign Naz this summer, but it's because you don't need that hanging over your head. Like, that is like, we already did this, right? Like, if you have it hanging over your head, there's a significant chance you lose one, if not maybe both, of Naz and Nickeil.
Sorry, I'm just kind of digging through some
so
more
to the
of
Valanciunas thing, you keep digging.
Yeah.
But if you did that, right? Malcolm Brogdon's an expiring. I don't know, like, how does Malcolm Brogdon fit into this? He gives you another guard, a team that I don't know if they need any more guards right now, even though Dante has 9 healthy toes. But like Valanciunas, Valanciunas making $9 million a year. I know he's not a perfect player, but that's I think a winning team would like that. Couldn't you then flip him at the draft?
Theoretically,
you know what I mean?
yeah, sure. Or even at the deadline again, yeah, like just to somebody else for a different $10 million player who's maybe an expiring player. You're right. And I think that should be the goal. I don't. Yeah.
And maybe he's Rudy insurance. Like, maybe, like for all the Rudy stuff we've been on, maybe he's just another center that, he's not making $30 million. He's not the defensive player that Rudy is, even when Rudy's not playing well. But again, we're just trying to kind of come up with, none of these are going to be Julius Randle for Jimmy Butler straight up.
Yeah, right.
That's not happening. But can you do, and I think we overlook because it happened 3 years ago. But if you're asking me why I'm optimistic, it's because Tim Connolly is still here. And I think that D'Angelo Russell for Mike Conley and Nickeil Alexander-Walker trade gets forgotten about. It was the Timberwolves that held it up. basically like, we have the leverage somehow. Like, no one knew that, but like, we have the leverage and we want 3 second-round picks. And Tim Connelly, on his clock, got whatever he wanted. So with this Julius Randle thing, if people tell you that he's untradeable, I just don't agree with that.
Yeah.
And I think you have a couple other ones here. Maybe not the one from Wildeberg. Shout out to Will. But some other good trades that we can do.
So let me put this one up there.
I like this one.
Okay, but this one is illegal. So there's also
awesome. Way to go. Look at me.
There's also an issue in just like the ESPN's trade machine. I would just recommend to anybody going and using the Spotrac one.
Yep.
It just account like this trade literally right here, which is Julius Randle for Bruce Brown Jr. and Chris Boucher from Toronto. It says it works on the ESPN trade machine. It doesn't work because what do we know one of the rules to be, right? Like the Wolves can't take back more money in a trade. Well, Julius is $33.1 million, next season.
Yeah.
And then Bruce Brown Jr. is $23 million and Chris Boucher is $10.8 million. So that's $33.8 million versus $33.1. So it's close, but you can't do it. But I bring that one up because this is the idea I like for a Julius Randle trade, which is those players are both on expiring contracts. And I think like the needle to perfectly be thread is players on expiring contracts, but players that you could then also use their bird rights because you have them again.
Yeah.
To one of them back, like Boucher's like 32. He seems like he's still like, looks like he's 24, but like there's just, I would like to, if you're letting go of Randle, get expiring money back, which opens up the ability to bring back Nas, Nikhil, and then some added spending, maybe the mid-level. If you use the mid-level, you got to stay beneath the first apron. But you could do Nas, Nikhil, and bring back Brown or Boucher with their bird rights, another type of exception, not the mid-level, and it'd be able to stay underneath whatever the barrier is there. You wouldn't have, I don't think you would have the first apron restriction there, but I just like, if you're going to let go of Randle, adding back opportunity to sign any, like numerous different options, because the thing that we went over a few weeks back was that was a big shifting point for me in my head was like, okay, theoretically, if Randle opts out of the contract or he's not on the team, you could get Nas at his number, you could get Nikhil at his number, and then you could get another player with the mid-level exception. Understanding that you could get that third player was what kind of switched it to me of like, hey, we really got to consider just getting off of that player option somehow. I think with this type of, again, the Brown and Boucher trade, which doesn't work, but highlights what I'm talking about. Two players who are on expiring contracts that I could see a world where this summer they go, okay, yeah, we're re-upping you and you're part of this plan in the rotation going forward. Who does that sound like? Nickeil Alexander-Walker, right? That was in the D'Lo trade with Mike. Is like, okay, it kind of seemed like Filler, he flashed and after the trade deadline was interesting, and then we re-signed him to another contract in the offseason that we would have maybe had the opportunity to had he not been on our team and we had the ability to go over the salary cap to re-sign him. Like that's, you kind of need to have these like opportunities out there to grab pieces. So that's why any deal that is bringing back one or multiple expirings is attractive to me, in that at a minimum it's shedding salary, but with a little bit of upside of, hey, maybe we hang on to this guy and they do, they're intriguing for the future. Does that make sense?
Yeah. But again, I just go back to, I know we're talking specific trades now, but if that would be an admission that you're starting to plan for next year, which sure. I thought is what happened 48 hours before media day, is that this was about you. No one, I mean, not you, no one thought Karl-Anthony Towns for Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo is going to make us a better basketball team this year. And if people thought that, you've been proven wrong. And if one of us said it, like, we've been proven wrong. So sure. I love that stuff too. Like I would say that is the ideal scenario to take the players out of it, right? And the picks, I don't even know how to wrap my head around, but you're trading up the best player probably in the trade who has this potential player option for guys that just will hurt your finances less, because you plan on spending a lot of money this summer. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? I also thought it was interesting too that all the trades you got, I think you said just like send me your trades.
I didn't say Randall. Yeah, they're all.
It was all Randall, and it's just like I'm
There was
telling
one
you,
Nikhil one in there. There was
I
one
think
Nikhil
that's
in there.
I think that's one to keep an eye on. I if this team is 500
Yeah,
and
I do
let's just domino this. Ownership comes out, new ownership wins. Tim Conley gets a big fat extension. He's here now. He's like, this is my team. I'm going to build it. We're 500. I want to keep collecting assets. I mean, the Pistons pick is, I woke up today with a 6 seed in the East. Like, that's a real asset now that this team has that they didn't have before. But if they say, hey, we're not going to sign Nikhil this summer. I know he's beloved, but we're not going to do it. If you're not going to sign Nikhil this summer,
yeah.
you should trade him by February 6th. And he's on like a $4 million deal, which makes trades damn near impossible again. But could you get a pick for him?
Well,
Like
you
a
could get it,
first-round pick?
or you could get a guy on a rookie contract. One of the trades
And
I
you
saw.
love that shit. Remember that back in the day? You would love just finding some rookie who was like, he had a bad first year, Jackson Smith and Jigba, but look at him now.
Jackson. We're looking for the JSN for the NAW. I mean, the reason I have hesitation with that one is I just think I'm just really high on Nikhil.
And I am,
and I know you are too. Like I've been, and so are so many people on this. I'm really not coming at you. It's just when I start thinking about it, I go, oh my God, I just like feel like this is a guy that works on any team. Like I think Nikhil Alexander-Walker works if he goes and signs for a bag with the Brooklyn Nets next season. Like that makes sense to me.
How is he not Caruso or Derek White? Like
exactly, like all these different iterations of qualities of team, which I'm not really sure which quality of team the Wolves are going to be, but I could just see like I really don't care what the number is on it because it's not going to be nuts, right? Like I'm not that worried about a 4-year contract to Nikhil Alexander-Walker. Like I just think cap's going to go up, and he would just need to have like a mental break or something to not be able to be like a mid-level caliber player in a couple of years. And if you're signing him to something around the mid-level, I struggle to see how that one flops. But I hear what you're saying too. I just wanted to say like that my personal opinion on that.
But don't Scott Layden yourself. But once the trade deadline
I
comes
saw
and
Scott
goes,
Layden at Madison Square Garden. He said, "I'm a fan of the podcast."
No, him and Adam Silver.
No,
anywho, when I say don't Scott Layden yourself, because the way the NBA calendar works is once February 6th at 3 p.m. Eastern time or whatever comes and goes, you can't make any more like transactions until the summer.
Fair, totally fair.
So I'm saying like, yes, if I was a minority owner in this team, maybe that'll happen. I would sign Nikhil this summer. But if there is thoughts internally that we're not going to do that, then you just have to trade him now.
Fair.
And that's that's the whole asset management thing of just you have to figure out these next 2 weeks, what I said at the top, how you're going to figure out the next 2 to 4 years. You did that to kick off the season with a blockbuster trade. So keep that same energy. Embrace the fact that no one wants to call it a gap year, but I don't know, you wake up today and you're 23 and 21. Like it might just be a year to really reset everything and get a jump start on other teams in the league.
The one I can't find. There's seriously a lot of fake trades on Twitter. Go look at them at DaneMooreNBA. The one Nikhil one that I saw was like a 3-team trade, but Nikhil was being sent out and Mark Williams from Charlotte was being sent back. And I at least I like the idea. Like that's like shout out. I wish I could find this. Shout out to the person who thought of it because I like that idea of it. Right? It's like okay, getting off of Nikhil $4 million because if you're not gonna pay him 15 or 16 or whatever in the summer, and you're then repurposing that $4 million contract into another $4 million contract, but it's also for a player who plays like one of your current players who you might need to eventually replace in Rudy Gobert. I think Mark Williams is as good of like a poor man's Rudy approximation as there is out there. So you're right. Like, and those are things that can and should be considered. And the score shouldn't have been 133 Julius Randle trades to 2 Nikhil Alexander-Walker trades where we did it there. But you know, I get that as well. Let me grab our break. We're going too long here. Kyle, let's tell them about Watermelon Water. really excited to have Watermelon Water as a sponsor this season. We've been telling you about them the last few weeks when Kyle has been on there. It is, as Kyle said, it's a drink that he has coming back from the gym every day. It's got the electrolytes. It's got that rehydration to it. I think of it like, Kyle, as I used to be a big like coconut water person, and just like if I was at home like sitting on the couch and be relaxing for a while, I was like, okay, I'm gonna put good things into my body while I'm being complacent. I'm gonna rehydrate. Like, I personally love the flavor of this compared to coconut water with the same hydration benefits. It really does taste like biting into a watermelon. That's because it is cold pressed watermelon juice. You have any watermelon water stories from this week?
No, because I'm all out. My wife polished them all off.
Yeah,
But it really is delicious. And again, I kind of go back to growing up, like in all the basketball tournaments, Gatorade and Powerade kind of dominated my life. This is as good, if not better. And I think if you dig into some of the ingredients, it's probably actually just better for you. So I think it's delicious. It does kind of taste like drinking a watermelon. As I said earlier with trade deadline stuff, like start to plan now for the summer. Because there's nothing better in the summer once the snow goes away than a watermelon. Like that, watermelon is the fruit of the summer. Mm-hmm. So try this. Throw one in your bag when you're going to work, when you're going to the gym, when you wake up after a long night. It's a really good way to kind of get your body back on track.
It's WTR MLN WTR. So there's no vowels in there. That's the branding. You could see that if you're on the YouTube page right now. But we want you to try this out, and the easiest way to purchase it is if you're at Target or Whole Foods grocery shopping. You can just find it there. Try one. Just grab one, put it in your cart. WTR MLN WTR. But also, if you just get your groceries delivered, or occasionally do, through Instacart with Target, you can just throw these into your cart, have them delivered. And then same thing if you get your groceries delivered through Amazon via Whole Foods, watermelon water is there too. So we would love it. It'd be a great way to support the pod, support a new sponsor. Literally just throw one into your cart next time you're doing it. And I think you will. Like, I will be surprised if you did not like the flavor of this at all. And it costs more than a Powerade, but it is, the benefits seriously outweigh it. And I think it's something that you could kind of convert in your fridge from, I don't know, maybe you're a Diet Coke person, whatever, and just the thing that you go and grab it, make the thing that you go grab in your fridge most often a healthy thing. We'd love it if we think watermelon water could be that for you. Again, WTR MLN WTR. Check them out at Target or Whole Foods. Today's show is also brought to you by Falling Knife Brewing Company. And as I said yesterday on the pod, I did not realize that Saturday's game was a 2 p.m. daytime game. So then I was thinking for this ad read today, I'm like, okay, well, this is like, we got to remind people to go to Falling Knife on Saturday, because I think, in my opinion, the best possible time to go to a brewery and hang out at a brewery for like 3 hours is like mid-afternoon on a Saturday. Might want to be summertime or fall or something like that. It's obviously cold here in Minnesota, but I think that sounds like an awesome Saturday to me. Going to get to Falling Knife a little bit before the game tips at 2 p.m. Have some beers. They have an expanded non-alcohol menu this month as well, because a lot of people are doing dry January. They got Rectangle Pizza there. I think it'd be a great place to hang out this Saturday and watch Wolves Nuggets. Obviously, a lot of other things going on there. I told you yesterday, Trivia Mafia every Wednesday night at 7:30. Initials game every Thursday at 7:30. Sorry, I said Trivia Mafia is Wednesday 7:30. Initials game is Thursdays at 7:30. They got High January going on, deals going on the THC beverages. Get over and see our friends at Falling Knife Brewing Company, especially this Saturday, to watch Wolves Nuggets. All right, Kyle, let's continue on with some more of this trade deadline talk. I know we want to get to Rob and Finch and some other things too, but I just there are other trades that have. I'm going to see if I can find this one. Intrigued me, and I don't know. It might be
shit. I love this trade.
So it's part of a bigger Jimmy Butler trade, with Butler getting to Houston. And the pieces coming back to Minnesota would be Steven Adams expiring $13 million contract, and then Jabari Smith, $9 million on a rookie scale deal. And I don't think you're going to be able to get that back for just Julius Randle. I think maybe you have to attach the Detroit pick into the context of this deal in some form or fashion. But I think that's how I would want to include the Detroit pick.
Correct.
Like for a young player who's going to be like on the come up here, not necessarily a rental or even like somebody for next season. You know what I'm saying? Like a guy who is going to be blossoming for a couple of years. That's what I would be willing to trade the Detroit pick for. And of the examples that I got or saw, this was the only one where I'm like, oh man, that's might be a real future pick involved here. And we can always be like, okay, Cat was traded for Randall, was traded for young player X, who, we're intrigued by. And people have different opinions on Jabari Smith Jr. I'm less so trying to do specific player stuff and more think about like archetypes of assets to be acquired. And this one for sure intrigued me.
What are the Rockets getting in your little graphic? Just because I see them giving up a lot and they're not listed.
Jimmy Butler.
Oh, Jimmy Butler. Okay.
Yeah.
That sucks. But yeah, Jabari Smith is 21. He is from an hour away, I think, from where Ant was from in Georgia. And he is kind of not a perfect comp, but the Nikhil part of it, right? Where it's like maybe a depreciated asset that you
only depreciated because he was the third overall pick. But yeah.
But I mean, he just hasn't played like a third overall pick. But you had a 6'10" guy that can space the floor to what you're kind of trying to build now is the next generation of this front court alongside Ant. I mean, like a Jabari Smith, Jaden McDaniels, Naz Reid long-term front court to me is pretty exciting. It's all length and some spacing, and now Jaden's the center of the future. So that trade, and on top of it, Steven Adams is just awesome as a person. That's another type of trade. And I mean, we kind of overshadowed this at the top, but I think the best chance for some of this to happen, while it's also the most complicated, and I don't even try to figure it out, is if the Wolves do find themselves in that Jimmy Butler trade scenario, right? Because as you said with Britt, that Jimmy Butler thing is not like the old days with the old CBA where it can just be Jimmy Butler for another star. Like you do need a lot of fat salaries in 3, 4, 5 teams to make that work. And that's where Julius Randle's contract does also really kind of benefit you in that scenario.
Last one. I'm curious how interested you would be in Lonzo Ball.
I mean, I don't have the shoes, but I'm a big fan of all the Ball brothers. Jello right now more than anyone. But is that Lonzo thing on the screen, though, $21.3 million, like he's an expiring?
Yeah. But maybe the expiring, right, with the idea of like, okay, you bring him back, you sign him to a deal, a future number, kind of like we were talking about with the Boucher and Brown thing. Like it's not necessarily just expiring to expire. You maybe bring him back. And what I think is interesting about Lonzo is it reminds me of Mike this year, where there's like kind of a cap on his minutes, where they want to cap his minutes. And I don't think Lonzo's ever going to be like a 30-minute a game guy, right? So he could kind of in perpetuity. The fit there makes sense as you like scale up Rob's minutes into the future, and Mike retires. And it just is like the player that has a ceiling of something pretty special without probably ever having the expectation or demand of being like, hey, I need to be playing 25 minutes a night or I'm mad. Like Lonzo's like, I'm never playing 25 minutes a night. I just think there's some stylistic fits in there, but then I take a deep breath and I go, okay, do the same Cat thing. Trade a Cat for Julius Randle for Lonzo Ball, who's played like 15 games in the past 3 years, that part of it is tough, but I am intrigued by the expiring nature of it, that I could see him fit from a stylistic standpoint, also from a minute standpoint in an Ant, Rob, Nikhil, Dante, whatever type of backcourt where it's another guard who plays like the two, can sometimes play or guard the 2/3. I definitely am intrigued by by pieces of that, but it's like, okay, wait, really? Lonzo Ball's the primary the primary piece coming back. That part's tough. But what do you think about Lonzo?
You're the best in the business. You set this up for the next segment too. I like that. And I know you're saying, wait, so I traded Karl Anthony Towns for one of Lonzo Ball's knees and 9 of Dante DiVincenzo's toes.
Yeah.
That's tough. But that's shout out to CJ McCollum. Like, that's the world we live in right now with this new CBA. So I actually love that because I'm with you on, I think Lonzo Ball doesn't, well, I mean, this isn't like a take, right? Like, he doesn't make $21 million next year when he signed. Like, he's going to take a pay cut and he's just kind of happy to be here. He would make injury reports a lot of fun because you never know if he's going to play. But I think that's a fun guard to sprinkle in. I think, what is Lonzo on his career? Like 33% from 3. So you're not getting
much improved like later on in his career. I mean, he's actually one of the cooler, like, sucked at shooting and now shoots.
Yeah, and I just think more than anything, it's this, what does he definitely bring you? Pace, a little leadership. I think both the Ball brothers that play like have shown like they can, maybe not always be on the best teams, but I think Lonzo Ball would be a nice mix into, we just talked about the front court of the future if you were to get a Jabari Smith, the back court of the future with Rob and Dante and Ant. And so my take is I would do that trade. But it does just flip my mind into something I texted you last night of something that should be addressed, I think, now, and it relates to the trade deadline, but also relates to the future. Who does Dane Moore think should be this? No. Who does Dane Moore think the starting point guard of the Timberwolves will be in October 2025?
Like, if I have to place a bet on it?
Yeah, use promo code Dane.
Dante DiVincenzo.
Okay, and that's probably fine. And maybe, because we haven't really talked about this that much, right? Because when Rob Dillingham was drafted, he was drafted as the point guard of the future because there was no Dante DiVincenzo on the team. And then Dante gets acquired 48 hours before media day, and now you're kind of like, you have this new thing. I think it'll be Rob, but I'm not trying to pander. But let's say it is Rob. Like, let's say their plan long term.
Well, can you first say why you think it will be Rob? I mean, because that sounds like what you want it. I get why that would be what you want it to be, and it might even be what I want it to be. But if we're trying to pick it, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and again, this does build off of 38 minutes of what we just did.
Like, I want the Redskins to win this weekend, the Commanders to win this weekend.
Edit that out. No, because to me, again, I know that as long as Chris Finch is here and all the different people that are in this pot, like, they don't want to just concede. And I agree with that. Like, you don't just want to fold, because you could find yourself in a ideal playoff scenario come April, whatever. But to Britt's point, you're not a Western Conference final team. You weren't really even a Western Conference final team last year, but we don't want to talk about it. I think Rob should start right now, because Dante, from my understanding, and the doctors I've talked to, shout out to Brent, like, he's not coming back. Like, that toe injury is severe. So if he doesn't come back, why not?
Hold on. Let's not.
Let's
not say Dante DiVincenzo is not coming back.
Unless
you're saying you think Dante DiVincenzo is not coming back.
I think a grade 3, what he has, is something that, I mean, maybe he comes back in March. Again, people know you're a reporter. I'm just listening. But if Dante DiVincenzo, doesn't come back this season.
I don't know. I mean, I haven't been like told that he for sure is. I'm just saying I haven't been.
Sure. Yeah.
I haven't been given the like.
Thank you.
He's out for the season.
You're being mature. Let's just hypothetical.
Yep. Sorry, I just want to say that.
If Dante DiVincenzo does not come back this season,
okay,
your
I just got the
ceiling
name wrong. That was embarrassing.
Your ceiling without Dante is much lower. Agreed?
For sure.
So why not see if Rob can be the starting point? Because I still look at Dante as, like, I mean, I love him. Like, what he did when he joined the starting lineup was add all the little stuff that you want. And I thought it shifted Mike Conley to a role that better suited him. So why not keep Mike? I know he was fantastic against the Mavericks, and probably him and Jaden were the reason they won that game. But why not keep Mike in that role? Because you do know for next year, October 2025, when you're like thinking, is it going to be Rob? Is it going to be Dante? you're pretty sure it's not going to be Mike, right? Starting point guard next year. So why not give Rob 30 games to kind of feel it out? He's going to bring some of that Dante. He's going to bring that pace and that spacing. And yes, he's going to be a sieve defensively, but maybe you can kind of work it out a little bit and figure out like what works well. Like he does fight, even though he's smaller, but Darius Garland fights, Chris Paul fights. So I'm asking you that question because if it's going to be Rob, if you said Rob is going to start game 1 next season, then I think Rob should start now to get an idea of it.
I hear that. I mean, I think it's like it goes back to what you said right at the top, which is like, what are the motivations of this season now? And I think you and I, maybe even you more than me, would skew future centric and justifiably so, and be like, yeah, let's give Rob these final 30 games so he can see if we feel comfortable with him being the starter next season when Ant's going to be closer to entering his, like Wolves should be good next year, right? Because Ant should be even better. And like, a lot of them are young. I get that, but it does right now still seem like they are trying to maximize every drop out of the sponge that is this season. You see that in the behavior towards Julius Randle, towards, Mike Conley playing 32 minutes in the last game, and he played great, and Rob played less than 9. Like there is, and we'll talk about Finch here a little bit later too, but does it strike you that they're anywhere close to that? Be like, yeah, Rob, let's do it. Start with us, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't seem like they're going to do that, right?
You know what the most telling thing was? Did you listen to Jaden do his post-game interview? By the way, Jaden McDaniel's stock. Hello. I think it was Leah B. Olson said to him.
Yeah, like, thank you or something.
No. She was like, hey, Jaden, like, this was a big win against the Mavs because now you won the tiebreaker in the playoffs. And Jaden, who I am his biggest fan, I did not think he would have known this. But he was like, yeah, but, we're pretty disappointed that we lost the tiebreaker to, like, the Warriors. And what that told me is like this team is trying to milk every single possible victory. Like, they're thinking internally tiebreakers in January. You know what I mean? So I'm with you. Like, everything on the deck shows that they want to try to maximize wins. But if I may, to your Commander's point, that's kind of what the New York Giants did towards the end of the season last year, and then they bleeped up trying to get Jaden Daniels. So the Wolves can't get Cooper Flagg. But a couple weeks ago you told me, and you were right, and I pushed back, and I was wrong. But you're like, I'm not really having a lot of fun covering this team. Like, this is just kind of a mediocre 500 team that probably finishes 42-40, 44-38, and then maybe they just, the West has a lot of those teams. The Clippers, the Lakers, the Kings, the Warriors, the Suns. Like, they could win another playoff series. But what does that do now? Because I thought last year kind of reset. Every day it was, look how far we've come, friends. They've cleared all these demons. But I would be disappointed if this team had a 6-game playoff series by milking every last short-term thing they can rather than starting to set themselves up for the future. Because, again, I'm a broken record, Dane, but right before the season started, you made a move that set you up for the future. So why not just lean into the future?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's because that might have been just the flaw in the initial messaging of it, which was we made this trade for future financial flexibility, but we also made it to compete now. And it reminds me of 2022 when we traded all of this for Rudy Gobert, but we also believe that we can unlock more of him.
And that was wrong.
And that was wrong. And it's also proving to be wrong that this team can be as good as last season's team, which was part of the message. We think like with the combination of DiVincenzo and Randle that can fit together and work and be as good or as good as it would have been with Cat. Plus we get the added benefit of financial flexibility going forward there. And I think what we've learned in the first 45 games, or whatever, of the season is that was somewhat misguided because Dante, now he's hurt, but like you kind of did figure out the Dante variable about 25 games into the season. I actually think they're kind of figuring out the Julius Randle variable or parts of it, right now. And it's still like, we would never sit here and be like, this team can be as good as last season's team still. Mm-hmm, right. Mm-hmm. So, I get what you're saying. You're like, they made a trade for the future, but that wasn't their they did, but they also made a trade for the present. And again, that was their messaging. And that was what their behavior has been the entirety of the season, when I don't want to say catering, but like kind of like catered every which angle to Julius to maximize it, to Dante to maximize it. So I don't know if it's fair to say that they made a trade for the future, because they didn't make a trade exclusively for the future, right?
Right. Yeah, I see what you're saying. I 100% see what you're saying. But this is actually all very well thought out by the producer of this podcast, because we're talking now about the starting point guard 8 months from now, 9 months from now. But it does, to me, tie into the trade deadline. Because, again, like every mention and reply you got on Twitter, and tell me if I'm wrong here, did you see one trade that made them better on February 7th?
Oh, that was crazy. But
you see my point, though? It's like, so if everyone is hyper-focused, internally and externally, on trading Julius Randle, you're going to be worse. And I'm the guy that's like, oh, Leonard Miller could be like, I get all that, but they also could just struggle. Like every other young player does. I get it, man. The Grizzlies have Wells. Go watch Wells like his first 5 to 10 games, right? He's not the 3-and-D spec. Like these guys need some time. So if you're going to focus on, we got to get Julius out of here so Nas can start, your front line all of a sudden is a small forward, Nas Reed, a Rudy Gobert that doesn't jump for rebounds, and maybe the second best player on the team right now, Jaden McDaniels. So, like, you're going to get, like, how are you guarding Jokic? Let's say they trade Julius Randle tonight. Like, how are you guarding Jokic tomorrow?
Yeah, then it's Nas. Yeah.
All right.
Or Rudy 101. Probably be Rudy 101. Yeah. Yep.
But you know what I mean? So, like, that's this other component of, I've had some people be like, well, if you trade Julius, they're going to get even better. I don't see that now. Long term for sure. But there's way too many variables of like, get rid of Julius and bring Leonard Miller in. Leonard Miller has played like 14 real NBA minutes. He's not going to shut down Daniel Gafford. So that's why I'm really stuck right now with this organization of, you made a really good point, but I thought the messaging was the CBA ruined what we tried to do. I mean, they trade for Rudy before the new CBA comes in. So like the domino effect there, then the rules change, the league changes. You had one of the best rants ever the other day about how the league is evolving again to like, is a 6'10" power forward that doesn't really space the floor and a 7'2" center that doesn't space the floor. Like, is that going to beat Oklahoma City? Probably not.
Yeah.
So I will buy in and I will drink the Kool-Aid if you give me one clear path. But to me, it's like fork in the road moment. And we're trying to be like, well, how do we go both north and south? And I think that is how, not a perfect analogy, I know, but I think that's kind of how you get to Golden State. And again, they won titles, but like trying to do the 2 timeline thing, there's not an organization right now in the NBA that made it work. And I think the Wolves, as, I don't know if you saw Bobby Marks, as projected to be the second highest projected tax payment team at $91 million. You don't pay $91 million in luxury tax to be 500.
Right. No, and that's why I think the messaging was a bad idea, much like the Gobert unlocking, like choosing to have that be the messaging. Now, what we don't know is if that messaging of financial flexibility and a belief in Julius Randle long-term was in fact privately what they felt and believed. And I don't know that today. You know what I'm saying? Like, I haven't had a conversation with Tim Conley or Matt Lloyd or Dell Demps who have been like, actually, Dane, this is what we're thinking, and we would, nobody knows that. Like Shams doesn't know that. Like there is subterfuge in all of this stuff from a PR standpoint.
You think the arbitrators know that? Do you think it just came up one day?
Like, so what are we doing with the kill to death?
If I was one of those 3 arbitrators, just like selfishly be like, hey guys, by the way, like this is all under NDA, but like, are you going to keep Nas?
Right.
But you're totally right. Like no one really knows. It's just, if you're take yourself out of being a smart analyst and getting all this stuff and being connected. Like if you're a fan, like you can only do what the messaging is. And it does seem like a lot of people right now are thinking this idea of having your cake and eating it too. And that just doesn't ever work, like in anything. So why not make a decision? And you know what? There's a real chance that they do. There's a real chance, in my opinion, that they find this 4-team trade and they do reset everything and they keep Nas and stuff. But failure to do so, as you pointed out 2 weeks ago on Excel, could really You can't just coast into the deadline and be like, we'll figure out this summer, because this summer could go. I mean, there is a scenario where Julius Randle's on the team for 4 more years and you lose Nas and Nikhil, and then it's like, well, then what?
Right. Yeah, I mean, we could do a whole thing on like the messaging and how it's all played out. But I think, and I just want to close it with this, is like, I think the messaging and the plan changed over the course of the summer. And the evidence of that is behind the move you made for Rob Dillingham, and then the president of basketball operations, 45 minutes after drafting Rob Dillingham, comes to the media and talks to us about his being ecstatic about drafting Rob Dillingham and saying, when he didn't have to, that he's going to play right away from day one. Like, why would Tim have said that if it was going to be this? That makes no sense. Why would you? Or that would be a huge PR like fumble. And Tim doesn't talk that much, So like, I say that to mean, I think they thought there was this path. And then you have the, months go by, and now this Randle and DiVincenzo thing comes together, which repurposes your prior plan. And we've missed messaging points from them along the way, which I think is at the core of what your frustration you're saying right now, or what you want is, what's the path? What is it? Like, I'm cool. I'm going to jump on board and get behind it and find things to be encouraged about within the path, but I have no clue what the path is. Like, because a path that includes Julius Randle signing some sort of extension is so different than a future that includes trading him and getting off of him and bringing in other pieces to backfill behind it. Nas, Nikhil, a player acquired at the deadline, Rob opportunity, whatever. Like, it's really, I really empathize with the fan base in not knowing what they even should believe, which just gets them to a point where they just go, all right, 135 trades about trading away Julius Randle. It's just because that at least just gives us a path. Then we know what the path is going forward. Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be pictures of the whiteboard, right? Like, we did not see, like, I'm not pandering. Like, you're the smartest guy I know doing this. You had no idea that the D'Lo trade could look like that and get 3 second-round picks, which one of them became Leonard Miller or whatever. So I hold out hope, because one of my friends was like, well, why we haven't heard anything? That's probably the best news. I think this front office is really tight-lipped, and I think you could just be sprung on. I mean, how many espresso martinis was I deep when Karl-Anthony Towns got traded? It's like, we didn't see that one coming. So I think there's a real chance that they do figure this out. But I think that is the fan base's thing right now too. That the Rob Dillingham draft pick and the Karl-Anthony Towns trade happened like inverse of how they would normally happen. And to me, it's thrown everything for a loop, because I thought Rob was drafted out of Kentucky to be the point guard of the future. Mm-hmm. And we're 44 games into this, and Rob Dillingham played 9 minutes in a night where the prize, right? Wording, messaging, the prize of the Karl-Anthony Towns trade was out with a foot injury.
Mm-hmm. I think this order of operations thing that you're talking about, or getting out of the order of operations, happens. I think about 2022 again, before trading for Gobert, they signed Kyle Anderson. You know what I'm saying?
Yep,
and Kyle ended up like kind of fitting in with Rudy and being, as you coined it, somebody who speaks French. But like, on the surface, like honestly, if July 10th, be like, wait, what? You added both Rudy Gobert and Kyle Anderson, 2 guys who cannot and will not shoot. Like that, that didn't make sense, because I don't think they signed Kyle Anderson knowing that Rudy Gobert was coming. I think they believed, Kyle's smart, he can fit into different things, and he proved to be able to do that. But this sort of, just with the nature of how the transaction windows work in the NBA, like, sometimes you got to make a decision now that you would have liked to be able to have made months later after you've made a different decision, if that makes sense.
And my overall arching thing is, again, this is all about building around a transcendent player that you rarely get, right? You rarely get these Cade Cunninghams, Anthony Edwards. You got to kind of thread the needle. And I think, petty aside, like Ant's got more Western or conference finals trips than Joel Embiid. Like that stuff matters. The winning matters. The Rudy Gobert trade, in my mind, was a good trade. But now you're in this spot where you need to pivot again. And I think you're being naive if you don't admit that maybe Naz Reid can't be a $35 million starting power forward.
Yeah.
We all just assume because we love him and have the towel that he's going to be awesome in an expanded role again. But I'm willing now, after 44 games of this iteration, to try it. And that's kind of where we're at. We can't, because with the Rudy Gobert trade, they did just, well, everyone doubted them after year one, they leaned back into it. Yeah. And that is my single most transparent, biggest fear, that they go, I know year one of Julius didn't work, but we're going to say bleep it to the haters and lean back into it. Because I don't think that can ever work.
Yeah, that would be something. Let's do last thing. We were texting about this last night or the other day. And we just wanted to talk about Finch a little bit. Let's close it with this, with him, because it's been a tough year, for Finch. I think for fans to watch him. I think for us I'd say for me to be in the role that I try to put myself in, which is, acknowledging the faults and acknowledging the strengths, in the midst. It's been really gray in that. And it's felt like, to me, kind of wrong to be too much pushing your finger on either side of the scale. It's been a bizarre year, which is in part been just a product of everything we were just talking about with the trade deadline. But I think to a lot of people, Kyle, again, maybe it's not 135 or 133 out of 135 trades where people are like, trade Julius Randle. I don't think it's that rate of people who want to fire Chris Finch, but there's a contingent of the fan base who is really, really frustrated with that. And I don't want to overlook that, because that's real. That's how, that's how people are feeling. And let's just kind of talk through it a little bit, and what you were texting me about.
Yeah, I've used this comp for 8 years, but I just remember when a real NBA franchise that was probably worth $700, $800 million at the time said, we're going to start Luke Ridnour at the 2 guard. And I was like, what the fuck? But I will always say, like, I as a fan, cheer for the Minnesota Timberwolves. So I don't care if your starting lineup is 5 Luke Ridnours, like, as long as it leads to winning. Last year was fun, not because they had fun players, but because they won games. And that's the whole point of this. With Finch, I mean, it's evident that Chris Finch now is having his worst year coaching as a head coach that he's had since he got here. We probably should get blamed for this, because when he showed up on a late Sunday night, right? Remember when that happened? Like, Ryan Saunders is out late Sunday, and you're like, we got to do an emergency pod. I was like, I don't even know what that means. We were like, this guy's an offensive guru. There has not been offensive guru since he got here, but he's also turned this thing into like a defensive kind of juggernaut at times. So I don't know what Chris Finch's main strength is, but I know that like every 18 months he gets a whole new deck of ingredients to try to make a stew, yeah. Right? Like you just said it, Kyle Anderson, Rudy Gobert, like they have this Patrick Beverly thing and then they pivot off that and they go all in, whatever. It's every time it keeps changing. Even this summer, it's like, hey, you finally had success. Go talk to Britt Robson for 3 hours, figure out how you're going to make the 2 bigs work. Oh, by the way, that big's actually leaving. So that is where I kind of empathize with him. Then you watch some of the game stuff and you're like, I think Chris Finch is acting differently, especially in end of game situations, than he's acted before. That's just my take. Like, I thought he was more comfortable being like, I'm not like Jordan McLaughlin, go in there for D'Lo and close the game out. I don't know, and maybe I'm blind.
You don't feel like that? You don't feel like that's
not happening? Not as much. I do think it's happening though. Like, I mean,
but it literally happened last game. I mean,
right. But to twist a little bit more, the best thing, because the majority of the blame right now is going on Chris Finch.
Sure.
And maybe this summer, I had this stat I looked up. If you go back and look at like the last 24 in-season coaching changes, I think 2 of those 24 teams made the playoffs. So like that's another one of like, let's try to figure out cake or eat it. If you are bailing on this season, then sure, try a new coach. But I would rather always do that type of massive change in the summer when you can kind of take a deep breath and reset and have a normal press conference. With Finch, I don't know, like the young guys not getting any run is a sign of a head coach that just wants to keep winning games. And I like that from a culture standpoint because you want Anthony Edwards to never take a day off. But then on the same vein of like, I mean, I literally, Dane, interrupt me. Like I'm talking on both sides of my mouth, but it's like, but are we trying to milk this thing to be 41-41? Like, what is the ultimate goal here? And I don't know, man, like calling a timeout when one of your more mentally, I think Jaden can get in his head a little bit, calling a timeout and giving the Mavericks a free opportunity to set up a play when you're up 3 between free throws. I don't know. That's really weird to me. Like, I don't think Chris Finch did that before. And those little things, I'm like, oh man, like what is going on here with that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think part of it is all coaches have different strengths and weaknesses. And you were talking about, is he an offensive guru? Is he a defensive guru? I think what Finch is, first and foremost, is a coach who can connect with his players and within that be the quote unquote, players coach. And there's just dangers that come with that, right? Of not always, if you are more of that mold of coach, like there's going to be less specific accountability that could rattle relationships. And I think that's where we saw some of the hesitation of closing lineups or catering to Gobert or catering to Randle and that. And then I think there's the other, I say that to mean he might be really good at that, but not good at some of those technical end of game things, or the results at least haven't played out to make a lot of sense. And I think about like the NFL, and I know it's often the coaches we talk about, oh, this guy should be fired in the NFL, but end of game stuff is messed up all the time, in the NFL. I don't say that to mean it's like an excuse. Like that should be stuff that between you as the head coach and your assistants, like there's certain things that shouldn't be missed. And I think there's like steps you can take so you don't miss those things. You don't take negative EV, right? Gameplay, but it does happen a lot. And so those are the things that like, I never really know, how perturbed to be by them, because it can be wrong, but is it that wrong? And then I also go to the point where it's like, of all of this stuff, if I had to be like, oh, things I know about stats or the cap or like actions offensively, there's like, for all of us, I think all of us, one of our weak spots or least level of understanding is the specifics of coaching, because we can't know all of that. We don't have skills in that sort of way. So I'm always hesitant, and maybe to a fault, I'm this way, but I was like that with Ryan too when he was the coach, or even Tibbs. Tibbs, like it's just like my gear always goes to, I don't understand as well what is going on, or I don't have this level of like, I couldn't do it, right? So it's. Does that make sense? I just struggle with like knowing how to do it. Yet in the aggregate, I go, man, there's a lot of stuff about Finch that has bothered me this year too, and I think are correctable. To your point, it's just I just really struggle with it.
I will get crushed for this, but I just word saladed to you for a couple minutes. I want to just clear up. I'm actually still pro Finch, and that's not popular, and I get it, and you should make fun of me. But to the Nas thing again, that Mavericks game, you're like, well, he did try to like. I have it all dissected. Go to the 6:30 mark of the fourth quarter. He tries to close with Nas Reed. And then Nas Reed travels and then fouls a three-point shooter. But we wanted him to close with Nas. And then it's like, so back to this, what are you trying to do? Have cake or eat it? If Rob Dillingham plays more minutes than Mike Conley against the Mavericks, they lose the game. And again, I'm a huge Rob guy. I just ranted about starting him. But Mike Conley was the better option. So that is why. I mean, the best thing you can do right now, I'm being dead serious, if you're trying to like really come together Kanye West style and fix the Wolves, is watch this game the next morning and don't be online. Because right now everyone just wants to fire Finch. And some of that is really true. But like I watched that game and it's like, okay, so Rob is airballs a three. He's getting picked on a little bit. He just doesn't have it. And Mike's cooking. Let Mike finish this game out. And it worked. And they clinched barely 115, 114. So I'm the most confused about this than I am on anything, because I don't know, to your point earlier about like end of game stuff, pretty much every end of game situation right now is just Ant taking a weird three.
Right. And that's so it's
but
like,
don't you remember the first year when Finch cooked up some real sexy ATOs with 6 seconds left. Like there was one where a guy like flew to the backcourt and then they cut a guy in. Like, where's that?
Well, okay. What we do know about the last 2 end of game situations is Ant went rogue. That's
but then like let's throw all the bias aside for Luke Ridnour's status of like, let's just blame the actions and not try to have biases on the players, because I agree. Ant's the best thing this organization has. In the last 2 end of game situations, I think he just went like Leroy Jenkins meme of like, bleep it, watch me go.
Yeah.
And he's now what? 0 for 9 or 0 for 20, like in like last second shots or like game one. Like It's a thing, but is he also being like, well, I'm not going to let anyone else take this shot? I mean, there's probably better actions.
And then we could even put some of that on Finch too, of like, okay, well, Ant's going to go rogue, so let's get Ant in a position to effectively go rogue. Like, yeah, there's blame to be spread here. The last thing with Finch I wanted to get to, this is what we were talking about, is like to the not playing the rookie thing.
Oh, please.
And what you said to me, you were like, it feels to me like Finch is trying to prove a point. And I'm like, yeah, I could see that, but what is the point? Does that make sense? Like, what is the point that he's trying to prove? I'll answer after you, but like, what is, if he's just adamantly, I'm doing this to prove a point, like what is the point that he's trying to prove, and what is the motivation behind that point? Because even if we have question marks about Finch in X, Y, and Z way, I think we can agree he's a person who approaches things with logic and what the desire, to win, right? So what is the, I'm not saying there isn't disconnect. What do you think the disconnect is there, but for him?
That he was brought here to win basketball games. Mm-hmm. And they've lost more games this season at this point in the season than they did last year. And I get that. And now you're saying, well, that's a bad coach. But he replaced a guy that was essentially a puppet being coached by the front office, right? And then they clear out the Ryan regime and the Gerson Rosas regime, and they bring in, I mean, obviously Gerson brought Finch in, but like change the culture. And this is frustrating now because you're coming off of a really exciting season, but this is not the Timberwolves that you and I started covering 8 years ago. This team has expectations. They have an actual culture. They win. They show up every night. They don't DNP guys. And I think that might be the point that Finch is trying to make is like, I think Chris Finch is trying to milk wins because that's what a lot of coaches try to do. That's what Mike Malone was famous for doing, right? I'm going to try to win games. But on the rookie thing, and then I'll just throw it to you because you have a better
Hold
answer.
on. Do you not think, though, that like he's like, I'm just trying to win games? Like, don't you think that's an edict from the front office? Like, is there not an alignment there?
I mean, you're more plugged in than I am, but I've never heard of any sort of, again, to the messaging. The messaging has only been, I mean, Tim Conley's now on year 2 or 3, and he might sign an extension. Like, those guys typically replace the head coach and bring in their own guy. And he's been like, Finchy.
Yeah.
So I don't know, maybe there is. But then it's like, okay, so if the front office, reckless speculation here, if the front office is telling the coaching staff this edict of, you are empowered to play whoever you want, you're signed, I think, through 2028 as a coach, win games, it would make me then turn my blame pie pivot to the front office because you gave Chris Finch a less successful roster than you had 8-9 months ago.
Yep.
But I will just say on the Finch thing, because I get some of this. Leonard Miller, Josh Minot, Terrence Shannon Jr. People say Chris Finch doesn't develop young players. And to me, the 3 best players on this team are Ant, Jaden, and Nas. So I firmly disagree with that. Like, I think you can't, and by the way, like, yeah, Ant was the first overall pick. He should have just developed himself. Unless you think Jordan Poole's had a better career, Jaden McDaniels is the best 28th overall pick in the last 25 years. There's a website that shows these things. So I think he has done a really good job of developing the core players. And sometimes, man, these teams just burn through second rounders, right? Like the Jalen Noels of the world come and go. The Jalen Clarks of the world maybe just come and go. But I disagree with that point. I think he's done a great job of connecting with the young players who are foundational pieces of this. Mm-hmm. But you know who else is in that group now? Rob.
Yeah, that's the tricky part of it, because it's like we did this, and not to come at you, but like you were on this pretty big last season of like, I don't get why they're not playing more of the young guys, and my pushback was like, I just don't think like Leonard Miller or Josh Minot, this is 12 months ago, are going to give you production right now. I
not all of them are good.
I did it. Yeah, right. Like and I think like Leonard in particular, and actually to be fair, and I might have been wrong about this. Like I just thought Miller and Minot were like a ways away from being able to be functional pieces, and I think Minot has shown flashes of how, largely by training camp and preseason, of like, oh yeah, there's something like pretty functional here, like right away. I haven't and still don't think I see that in Leonard Miller. So it's kind of like the scale. And then there's Terrence Shannon Jr., who was a first round pick, 27th overall, right? Mm-hmm. And there's some attraction there too. You see some of what he's done in the G. You factor in that he's 24. He's probably a little bit more ready to go as a rookie than a typical rookie would be. But I also see and hear things about problems with his jump shot, and it's like, okay, so how, if you did integrate that piece, how big would the problems be? Because you integrate any of these young pieces, there's going to be problems. And then even to Rob, right? Like what we're saying there is like, we're learning that there are pros and cons to Rob. For sure pros and for sure cons to Rob there too. I think the difference in the frustration and why it's fair and you're like, hey, Dane, they should be playing the young guys more, opinion holds more water this year, because the talent of that young guy this year is Rob Dillingham rather than Leonard Miller or Josh Minot. And I just think we need to distinguish between the young guys. Like I would tier it out of like,
yes, absolutely.
Miller bottom of it, Terrence Shannon Jr. right above him, Minot above him, Dillingham above him. And they should be given opportunities according, to that ranking, and kind of think they have not enough maybe opportunity, but that's kind of been the pecking order of total minutes played, right, between those four quote unquote young guys. So I don't really know where I'm going with that.
But no, but I know where
you're about it. Yeah.
No, but I think you actually set me up for back to an hour earlier. What are you going to do with that Pistons pick?
Right.
Are you going to draft another rookie that we're just going to talk about for 3 years that isn't going to get run?
I just feel like that gets traded at trade deadline, and that's where I think Julius Randle gets traded. That would be my guess.
But then it kind of like,
trade deadline day, draft day. Sorry, draft day in the summer.
But does it make sense though? Of like, I'm pretty pro keep the pick, add another younger under 23 player to the mix.
Really, you are?
Yeah, because I don't think
I feel like I'm viewing that as like almost purely asset to attach to something.
But then you went from trading an hour ago Julius Randle for just expiring contracts to, if you're pairing that first round pick, which is now projected to be like 16 or something, to get, now you're trying to get a real asset though, right? Like, because we're not using the first round pick just to dump the player, because I think we kind of just proved that maybe you can just dump the player. You know what I mean?
Maybe.
Like,
yeah.
Malcolm Brogdon and Valanciunas is dumping the player. But I don't think you have to tie a first-round pick to that, do you?
Right. No, but you are absorbing back in the Valanciunas contract. That is not a lot of money, but it's money into the future, whatever.
I think you're great, though, to classify that when we look at like the young pups or the 10 through 15 on the roster, I think Luka Garza might still be young enough to qualify for that, that it's tiered. Like, we go
and Rob is in a tier of his own and should be treated accordingly. Yeah.
Unless you live in Des Moines, no one's watched Leonard Miller and Josh Minot more than you and I in Summer League, and they have some flash and they don't have some flash. But Rob is different because not only was he a lottery pick, you also used other assets to acquire him with that 2031. But the way I'll close it on this is, I just think the best time to like try that stuff, edicts aside, messaging aside, branding aside, is you start Rob Dillingham on Saturday in a cold January against the Nuggets when everyone's focused on football. I know that sounds so stupid, but that to me, like under the shadow of the night, just like kind of try some of this stuff now and get an idea of, can Nas be a power forward on a winning team next to Rudy? Does Nas breathe life into Rudy? I mean, Nas is like the most well-respected player on the team. Is Rudy hurt, or does Rudy just need, as psychoanalysis Britt said, just a lift, a pick-me-up? Same with Rob. I think if you're like, Rob is starting game 1 next year and we're doing this whole propaganda thing, that puts pressure on him. I think this is a good opportunity to continue to fire those magic bullets that did kind of work and change some things up. And again, to your point, I'm a dumbass. So I'm going to ride with whatever way this team goes. But right now, they're not going in any direction. To me, they're in neutral. And I think that is the worst thing you can do.
I think that's a good place to leave it. You have anything else?
No, take care of yourselves. It's cold. Whatever. Just if you're out there, check on your loved ones. It's sunny past 5 o'clock now, and a good weekend of football. So if you're looking to just sit on your couch and rest up on dry January, use promo code Dane and look at you're cooking in that bank account up there. Look at that.
I did hit some of my season-long NFL ones.
Wow, so, good for you. What was your best one? What was your
my biggest? This is really funny. Right, so we're going to talk about Prize Picks. I'll wrap up the episode with Prize Picks. It's up on the screen on YouTube. I had a lot that had. This is a really weird one. I probably even texted you about this. It made no sense to me how much higher Kirk Cousins' passing yardage total was compared to Aaron Rodgers going into the season. Yeah. So it's weird. So I had a bunch that were Rodgers more than his passing yardage total for the season, which somehow hit, even though Rodgers' season was a disaster. He kind of played the whole time. And then Cousins not hitting his. I was like, they both have Achilles. They what? Why is the gap 500 passing yards between the two? So I had a few with those two in there. So that helped.
It is Flex Friday. So again, go lean into that on Prize Picks. You can make an entry for this weekend using the Flex Friday for today. So it's not just today's picks, but also obviously Nuggets Wolves tomorrow if you want to have a little something on that. But Prize Picks is been a longtime supporter of us, and as always, you and I doing this for free, no paywall, no subscription. It helps us when you support the people that support us.
The two that I just picked two from the Friday slate of games. I think I'm going to watch the Sixers and Cavs play tonight. My guy Gershon Yabusele, he's playing a lot for the Sixers right now. I was watching them play the Nuggets the other night, and he plays a lot, functions a lot for them. 19.5 points plus rebounds plus assists against the Cavs. I think he gets a lot of minutes and plenty of minutes to be able to have 20 plus points plus rebounds plus assists. And then it was before the episode started, more or less than 1.5 3-pointers made for Dean Wade, who's going to be playing in that game without Evan Mobley. That one went away. So now I got to go Demon for more than 2.5 3-pointers made by Dean Wade. So just for those two, if it was a $20 entry, that would pay out 94.5 to 1 when normally, 2 is 3x on your thing. But let's throw in a couple of yours too and put together a big one. Yeah.
I'm always still leaning into football. So
I'm going to opt into this flex on them there.
I just can't. Also, there's a Jaden, you mentioned this earlier, but there's a Jaden Daniels free square basically where he has to throw for one passing yard and you hit on that.
Yep. Let's go for that.
Washington Commanders. Correct. 130. They're really bad against the run, as you saw. Jahmyr Gibbs kind of cooked them up, but the Commanders are a fun team. So I can't believe Saquon's rushing total is 130.5.
I know, it's crazy.
And everyone listening to this thinks I'm gonna go under. I'm just gonna go more.
No way.
Because as long as he doesn't slide, by the way, everyone stop sliding. Just run into the end zone, get your stats. I think he busts one again. I would bet that he has a rush over 30 yards and he takes one to the house in what probably might be a higher scoring game than most people think. So Saquon more than 130.5 rushing yards. And then I just took Brian Robinson less than 38.5 rushing yards because I do think there'll be a lot of Eckler in that game. And I don't think you can just run against that front for the Eagles. So Saquon, big game. Brian Robinson Jr., a little less of a game.
So it is, again, if we have it up on the screen here, it is Flex Friday, so you can protect this play for up to $35. So, if I put 35 on this right now, if I miss it, it goes back into my account as promotional play. I think I'm going to actually just do this one and also highlight that you can do a flex play within this where if only 4 of the 5 hit, you still win some. Yeah. I don't know. What do you think? Should we do the 11 to 1 on this or the 22.5 to 1 on this?
Let's just go for it. How much was your flight to Phoenix? We got to pay for that.
It's at least that. Okay. All right. Oh, so then
I'll Venmo you if we don't hit this. Go power play though.
I think I can't. I think I can only do the.
Oh, got it. Yeah, Flex Friday. No duh. Flex Friday, Flex Pro play. Let's do it.
Okay, so if all 5 of those hit, that's that's 11 So it's winning to win 385 on a $35 entry. Again, you could do this for $5 and it'd be the same thing. $5 to win 55 and a 4 of the 5 hit to win 10 there. It's just fun. Something to do. Particularly, on Sundays if you don't have fantasy or whatever, or for Wolves games, NBA. We love Prize Picks, and if you haven't created an account yet, create one using promo code Dane. Lets them know that you came from us, which helps us out, but also gets you $50 in your account when you make your first $5 wager.
I kind of teased this, but I'll see you next week.
Yeah, we'll be in Phoenix for that game. Was that on Wednesday?
Wednesday the 29th. So Wolves next game Saturday afternoon on ABC against the Denver Nuggets, Monday at home against the Hawks, and then on the road for a little back-to-back in Phoenix and Utah, and you and I will be in Phoenix to cover that one and probably have a late night, right?
We'll do a pod after that one, and it'll be good to see you, and it'll be good to do a pod in person. We'll react to that Phoenix game before they head out to Utah, and it's kind of that time of year, right, where something can pop up, and we'll Kyle's normally my go-to for any sort of emergency podcast too. So we might be jumping on here more often, but I appreciate you taking all this time on a Friday morning, and we'll see you middle of next week. Thanks for doing it, man.
Peace.
You guys can follow Kyle on Twitter at Kyle Theige, and listen to him on Flagrant Howls as well. Next up will be Jace and I on Monday morning. So there'll be a little bit of a gap of time between the Wolves game on Saturday and the next podcast, but we're still trying to protect our weekends as much as possible here. So Jace and I will get to that on a Monday morning, and then we'll have the Hawks game Monday evening. We'll keep rolling from there. Appreciate y'all sticking with the pod, and I hope some of this trade deadline talk stuff is intriguing. More of you, I know I said this the other day, the only texts I get about the Wolves now are screenshots of Julius Randle trades. So we did about 40 minutes on all the screenshots I've received. And I love the trade deadline. I love the cap and all that sort of stuff too. I hope we can get to a point where this kind of comes and goes, and whatever happens, and we enjoy the basketball of the rest of the season, even if that is of a 6 seed or 7 seed. I do still think this team is headed to the playoffs, and sometimes we forget that in and of itself is fun, even if it and intriguing, even if it doesn't meet prior expectations. But we'll see where this team rolls going forward, and I'll be here to talk about it until Monday with Chase. He's Kyle. I'm Dane. Peace out.
How I'm feeling, man, I hope it never stop, yeah. Green and hot so you can find me in the crowd, yeah. Don't let standards ever bring you down, yeah.